Preseason's over, thankfully. It's almost the end of August. September football is starting soon. College football's underway, and the Minnesota Vikings are officially clear for takeoff for the regular season. I'm Will Goodwin. With me, Jordan Hawthorne. This is Load the Box. Minnesota Vikings. The preseason's over. The Vikings, again, for the third straight year, went an offer in preseason. They are the anti-Ravens.
Yeah.
The wins and losses don't matter. We're just going to quick chat about kind of what we saw from some main contributors or what we believe to be potential contributors for the 2023 Vikings. Many of the guys that played on Saturday afternoon will either be fringe roster or cut, some of which have already been cut. So we're just going to get into it. Jordan, I think the first and obvious one was, you and I were looking for more snaps for Jaren Hall, and specifically more snaps for Jaren Hall with not the threes and the fours. And I think we maybe got a little bit more of that. He played with some of the maybe, higher level 3 back end 2 wide receivers. He played with Nick Muse. He got some snaps with some guys that are actually, potentially going to make the team. What were your takeaways from the Jaren Hall game in which he started and played the entire game on Saturday afternoon?
So we'll talk about this later, but it's going to be impossible now to talk about Jalen Hall without bringing Trey Lance's name up after the Vikings kind of had those two little, let's just call them flirtations with Trey Lance before the draft, and then this past week. But talking strictly about Jalen Hall's play, in the Saturday preseason game, I think he looked pretty solid playing with the 2s and the 3s. Obviously he wasn't playing with Jefferson and Addison. I mean, he didn't even have KJ, but he did a really good job, I thought, with, Jalen Rago in the game and guys like that, that he was running with. Had a really good quick change touchdown pass. Granted, it was just a little out route to a running back. It wasn't some crazy, 55-yard bomb, that stayed in the sky for 30 seconds. It wasn't anything nuts, but it was a good decision. It was a good execution of Kevin O'Connell's offense, which is what you want your 5th round rookie quarterback to be able to do. Kevin O'Connell had a quote after the game talking about how he's kind of been telling Jalen Hall to run and to be more mobile, which is it's a good and a bad thing because you want guys to come in that have the ability to move like that. You want them to come in with that. And you expect them to just know, okay, this is when I should run, this is when I should throw, this is when, and it's so much more complex than that. And so I thought he showed really well. I think he I feel like he was almost defaulting into making the 53 just as the emergency quarterback. I think he legitimately owned a spot on the 53-man roster with his performance. I think that he kind of, I don't want to say left no doubt because he could have played better in the second half especially, but I thought he did a really good job. I thought he was on time, thought he was accurate, thought he moved well. Would have liked to have seen him elevate the 5th and 6th strings a little bit better, but what do we want from the guy? He's a 5th round pick and he's 5'11". What are we asking this guy to do exactly? If he is playing for the Vikings this season, we should be buying Caleb Williams jerseys because things have went south in a bad way. The Vikings are winning 70-0, and we don't want to risk Nick Mullins getting banged up. So yeah, I thought he looked pretty good.
I think that's a good assessment. It was definitely a tale of two halves, and I think Kevin O'Connell not so slightly threw his, as you said, 5th and 6th stringers under the bus with his, as we started putting other guys in there, comment with kind of how things went south. And, I don't think that's, a knock against the backups to the backups to the backups. It's more just the reality of the situation is when you get deeper on the depth chart and you got guys who will not make the league, it's just going to be uglier. I mean, the Vikings allowed 6 sacks or took 6 sacks. I think all of them were in the second half, if I'm not mistaken. There was maybe one in the first half. So again, there was sort of that like ugly offensive line play, which is sort of another discussion, which I'll comment on in a bit, with just kind of my concern with the offensive line. But I think overall, Jaren Hall had a decent game. Those first 2 drives, one was the long 75-yard touchdown drive to open the game, and then the second one was the 5-yard drive after the Jay Ward sack fumble. 2 quick touchdowns. I mean, he looked sharp those first couple drives. Then after that, it was a little clunkier. But I think, like you said, saw enough of athleticism, decision making. He had some nice tight window throws. He wasn't just throwing lollipops to tight ends and running backs in the flat. So yeah, it was a preseason game. It was backups on backups, but it was about what you'd like to see from a guy who kind of finally got his chance to really just play the whole game. Of course, you'd have liked to see him win the game and lead a game-winning drive. And, maybe, if Greg Joseph makes that 54-yard field goal, we think about it differently. But it's a preseason game.
Right.
Like you said, he's making the team. It's pretty clear Kevin O'Connell likes the idea of the emergency quarterback. And for those unaware, the new rule forces you to have that third or emergency quarterback make the roster. They can't be a practice squad player. But then they can suit up for game day and not count against your dressed players quota.
Yeah.
So
I think it's 46.
Yeah, 46.
Or something like that that you can dress.
And it's in case of emergency only. So if the first 2 quarterbacks get injured, then they can play, sort of thing. It's pretty clear that O'Connell wants to use Hall for that. So he's making the team. I think this was a good sort of stamp on that. And we move on, and hopefully it's just number 8 taking snaps the rest of the year.
I disagree with you. I do hope that Nick Mullins and maybe even Jaren Hall get some play and some blowouts. That's my
that would be great.
That's my caveat. That's my I don't want Cousins lining up in victory formation too much. I want to see a lot of blowout wins, which I doubt we'll get. But one thing that could help us get those blowout wins is a guy that I think we have to point out, and this is my take on this, and this leads me to kind of a philosophy question, a football philosophy. Spell philosophy with an F if you want it to be an alliteration. But Jay Wild, I thought, had an outstanding third preseason game. He's had a very good training camp. I believe he's a 4th round pick out of Louisiana State.
LSU.
Yep, the LSU. What a college, by the way. I think this is actually supposed to be an LSU hat, not a Vikings hat, and it really fits. They produce really high level NFL talent. But this is my take on Jay Wild. Other than obviously he had the strip sack where he just came like he was shot out of a cannon. And blew up, I believe, Clayton Tune, who was kind of my guy.
Who very well could be the Cardinals' starting quarterback week 1 because they cut Colt McCoy today, which is surprising to me. I know some were projecting that, but surprising to me.
They're
tanking.
You cannot convince me that they are not tanking. And if I was, and this is so off topic, but if I was Vegas, I would probably stout whoever they have behind Garoppolo. And I would go all in on, like, Garoppolo ain't it. He looks really bad in camp. Go ahead and try to get Caleb Williams or Drake May. Like those, you got to try and get one of those guys. But anyway, Jay Wild, this is my take. Jay Wild is what we thought Lewis Cine was going to be. This fired out of a cannon, hard hitting, good rangy safety that's kind of a chess piece, a la, let's call it Diet Harrison Smith. And so this is the philosophy, the football philosophy segment that we'll start doing now, because I feel like I bring these up every show now. If Jay Ward and a Caleb Evans are good, does that make up for missing on Scene and Booth? Or can we still be mad at Kwesi? And that's kind of the question. If you get 2 guys that are good late in the draft, but you completely whiff on 2 guys early in the draft, Do you get a pass for whiffing? And that kind of ties in. This whole show should really just, it has heavy Trey Lance undertones, even though he's a Dallas Cowboy now. It kind of ties into that's the debate that's going on with San Francisco. Like, should they be scolded for failing on the Trey Lance thing? And, they basically traded 3 first-round picks for the equivalent for a first-round pick next season. Should they be scolded for that, or should no one even care because they were just in the NFC Championship game, and if the quarterback doesn't, tear his elbow up, they might be in the Super Bowl. Who knows what happens from there? And it's just kind of big picture. Yeah. I want your take on it. What do you think? Do you think we still scold Kwesi if he misses on those 2 picks, or do you think, just get guys in the building that can play?
I'll answer your question with a question.
Oh boy.
Do we care what round Tariq Woolen was taken in?
No.
So that's kind of my answer to the question. Tariq Woolen was a 5th round pick for the Seahawks, was an outstanding cornerback last year. I don't know off the top of my head if he made the Pro Bowl or if he was, I think he was maybe, I think he maybe finished 2nd or something in Defensive Rookie of the Year to Sauce Gardner for the Jets. I think that's kind of my thought on this is I don't think anyone cares that he was a 5th round pick. If anything, it just means you pay him less for the first couple of years.
Right.
And so it really doesn't matter in that sense. Now, when it comes to like the Lewis Cine pick and the Andrew Booth pick, there are some things, like there are some bones to pick with those guys. Not necessarily Cine, I don't think. I mean, other than the fact that you missed Kyle Hamilton, that's kind of the obvious one. But, with Cine, it's not like he was projected to be injured or had any red flags really in that way. With Booth, you could see that as more of a risk of this guy who's been injured but has showed some flash, and he can create turnovers if he's healthy, but he's not healthy all the time. And that was one where, maybe a calculated risk that isn't paying off. But I think, at the end of all this, and I think this is sort of like a global statement on the whole Kwesi criticism very early in his tenure, is that it's far too early to determine how good of a general manager he is, especially when the first season ended with 13 wins. Now, he took a lot of the roster that was left for him, but he did add some pieces that helped the team thrive, TJ Hawkinson most notably. But also, when it comes to the draft, so much of it is a crapshoot. I think about a third of the league is undrafted. I mean, Ivan Pace is out to prove everybody wrong this year, and he was undrafted, and it's looking like he might start. There's no guarantee of that, of course, but he is going to be a guy who plays a lot of snaps, and he was not drafted. So all of this to say, I personally do not care what round people were drafted in as long as they produce. And of course you'd like your high round draft picks to hit, but if the 4th round draft pick hits like you'd like the first one to have hit, then okay, you move on. And you got the same result that you were looking for.
I think the flip side of that, because it really is, it's like any good philosophy question. I don't think this is a yes or no question, right? No. And like it really comes down to, unfortunately, with the NFL being what it is, it's kind of, I think the answer to the question is if you field a competitive team and you are consistently a contender, doesn't matter where you take the guys. Now, where the problem lies is if you miss on enough guys, you end up in a situation where you lose your job, and then new GM comes in and you have the whole debate all over again. And so I'm not saying Kwesi's a bad GM. I think last week or a couple weeks ago on the show, I kind of laid out the game plan for attacking Kwesi for like a year or two from now, if we need to, so that we have that in the bag. That club is in the bag, but it's like you said, it's far too early to determine, because assuming Jay Wild is like good, and we've seen him in a preseason and he had a good camp, and so he might not take a defensive snap this season, and he might just end up being a really good special teamer or something. Same thing with a Caleb Evans. He's a guy who, he had a lot of concussions last season, so we got to hope that he can figure that out. But I think where you start looking, and I like the Tariq Woolen comp because he was a 5th-round pick, but you look at who they took before him. They got Charles Cross, the offensive lineman out of Mississippi State, who I have his PFF pulled up. If you hold me tapping, he graded out as like mid for an offensive lineman, which I think he was a top 10 pick. So like, a mid offensive lineman. Okay. But it's his rookie season. Maybe he improves. Boye Mafe, who also graded out, I think is a little less than, no, he graded out actually a little bit better, but, and they got Kobe Bryant and they got Kenneth Walker III, who was a good running back for them. And then Kobe Bryant was a mid defensive back before they took Woolen. And so it's like, if you can take, the goal is that you get a Caleb Evans and you get Jay Ward while also getting, and if you saw me last week in my bright green Notre Dame jersey and my beanie in the middle of the 95-degree Ohio heat wave, you'd understand I'm a Notre Dame guy. You could have had Kyle Hamilton and a Caleb Evans. And, and so you start looking and you start doing these. Hindsight's always 20/20, right?
Of course.
And those going to be teams that took linebackers that end up, flaking out of the league in a couple of seasons. They'll play a couple years of special teams and then they'll go on to, do whatever it is that football players do after their careers. And there'll be fan bases hosting shows like this saying we had 7 chances to take Ivan Pace Jr. and we let him go everywhere, and he ended up being a Hall of Famer. And and like you can always kind of do these things. I mean, like you said, a lot of undrafted guys that don't even get the time of day. But I do like that you brought up Ivan Pace. I did want to bring up that little bit of philosophy, just a little bit of something to chew on, something to think about. Bringing up Ivan Pace, he didn't take a snap. I mean, he didn't dress, and that, my God. I mean, we are watching Lady Gaga, go on SNL. I don't know if you've seen A Star Is Born, the new one, but we are watching a star being born within our own eyes, before our eyes. And this is gonna be fun. I'm sticking by it. If I make one prediction, he's getting 7 sacks. He's going to be like 3rd or 4th on the team in sacks just from his blitzes, just in his pursuit. And I think he's going to stout. I really do. Like, I think and training camp, excuse me, as I get choked up thinking about Ivan Pace, they're putting out packages in practice with Ivan Pace and Brian Asamoah while Jordan Hicks sits on the sideline, and I love it. I'm enticed by the young speed package as opposed to Jordan Hicks, who, again, did no one watch NFL football last season? Did no one tune into Vikings games? He is old and slow. He's like, I can do the same gripe with the offensive line. Ed Ingram and Ezra Cleveland got blown up every time they played a competent D tackle. We didn't replace it. That's a big, why didn't we do anything? If Jordan Hicks is playing every snap on defense and he continues to get toasted by the, premier tight end talent in the league or premier running back talent in the league, I'm going to be pulling my hair out wondering why we don't have some speed on the defense. I'd rather have speed and inexperience than experience that can't really do anything with it at this point. I'm getting real excited. Again, Ivan Pace, he's a Cincinnati guy. I owe the University of Cincinnati a lot of money because my lovely wife went there. Is it just my homoism getting me amped? Are you there with me?
I think we've had the same discussion for the last month, and
we're gonna have it every week. Every week.
I'm there with you. I mean, the fact that he did not even take a snap on Saturday says so much more than if he played and had 2 sacks.
Yep.
Because, just like how Josh Metellus has risen from practice squatter to special teams only to every single preseason game he's playing out the whole game to not playing a snap in the preseason, it's the same with Ivan Pace not playing in this last game here. The way that this regime runs the preseason is if you're on the team, you will not play. It's just kind of the way it is. And I mean, a couple weeks ago, O'Connell said something to the effect of, it's not whether or not Ivan's going to make the team, it's what sort of role he's going to have. And so it's very clear he's there. He's made his impression. And I think the thing that gets me to continue to buy into this kid is that he has a nonstop motor. And it's a motor in here, it's a motor in his heart, and it's also just a motor in his legs. And he knows that no one believed in him, and he's probably going to keep that, receipt until he retires. It's something that Tom Brady still carries with him, that he was the 199th pick or something like that. And so, no, I'm not comparing Ivan Pace to Tom Brady. All I'm saying is that it's clear that this guy is going to use this as fuel. And I just love that even more because what he showed in the 2 preseason games and the joint practices and everything alongside of it, how can you not be excited? Last thing I'll say on this, just a quick shout out to Vikings Twitter GOAT Thomas Sullivan. He tweeted, I think yesterday, something like, I love that we are all united on the fact that we love Ivan Pace Jr. It doesn't seem like there's anybody in Vikings fandom land that does not like this guy. So I'm excited. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Probably not the same level of, oh my gosh, this is Ivan Pace Jr. on the Vikings, because I didn't watch him at Cincinnati like you did, but I'm excited.
Well, and it just feels good to get one right. After you come out here and you say, you give some takes about how you think Kellen Mond could be the future, and, a big Zach Wilson guy, and, the job of doing this show is to swing for the fences sometimes.
You need some wins.
And it is nice to, who was what was his name? Like Chris Davis, I think. He played for the Athletics. He ended up going, you know what? Let's take it back even further and let's stay in the Cincinnati area. Adam Dunn, for you baseball fans.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just ground outs and strikeouts. And if I'm swinging the bat, it's either going into the river or it's an out. And this one's in the river, I think. It's not in the river. This one's in the air. We'll see if it gets caught at the track or if it goes out. But still a little bit of baseball mode because it's not technically September yet. So I'm 99.9% into football mode, but the Reds still weigh heavy on me.
So speaking of guys that you think could be the future, what do we think about Trey Lance as we have about, 10 minutes left in the show here? He is now a Dallas Cowboy. He was traded for a 4th-round pick. What was your reaction to that, or sort of response to the fact that he was no longer obviously linked to the Vikings because he now wears a star in his helmet?
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into my reaction with it doesn't make sense to me that he went to Dallas. I don't he's got a year left on his contract after this season, and I think Dak has also got 2 years left. And so it's just kind of confusing that he went to Dallas. But speaking from, being a Viking show, the price was just too high. And you look at what Kwesi did last season around the same time. He brought in Ross Blacklock and a 7th-round pick for the price of a 6th-round pick. Right, so former first-round defensive tackle, give him a 6th-round pick, get a 7th-round pick back from, I think, the Texans, and, we're cooking with gas. And then he brings in Jalen Rago, just straight up. Jalen Rago, we sent them a 7th-round pick. And we get a former first-round wide receiver who can take punts back and has really good speed. And so a 4th-round pick for me was too rich. I was all about trading for Trey Lance. I thought there was no reason not to. I was big in the Trey Lance, I think I texted you, I said I was starting to ride the Trey Lance hype train, and you tried to get me off of it, and I said it's too late. He's still younger than Joe Burrow was when Joe Burrow got drafted, and nobody thought Joe Burrow was anything when he was at Ohio State or when he was at LSU the first season. And then he figured some things out, and he had an incredible season at LSU and went on to become what he is. So I don't think Trey Lance, he's still a question mark to me. I don't want to lean one way or the other. But not for a fourth-round pick. That's just too much. For the Vikings anyway, I didn't want to see Kwesi do that, and it's not very Kwesi-like what he's shown so far to, invest that much in kind of a questionable stock. San Francisco, I keep seeing this debate online, this being said, like on FS1, ESPN, and they say like, well, the Niners saw him in training camp last year and they decided to go with him. And it's I don't think they liked what they saw out of Trey Lance in camp last year. I think they just knew they had to play him because they gave up so much to get him. And so they kind of felt handcuffed to him. They kind of felt like we can't call him a bust and go back to Garoppolo. We have to play him. And then once they found out Brock Purdy could play a little bit, they were like, okay, now we can get rid of Lance. Now's the green light. Get rid of him. We haven't liked what we saw. Sam Darnold's 1,000 times better than him. Get him out of San Francisco, which is just mind-blowing to me that they think so lowly of him. So I'm fine with the Vikings not making the move, knowing what the price is now. If we could have gotten him for even like a fifth, maybe, that's still a little rich for my taste. But I understand San Francisco wasn't really coming off of him for a sixth or a seventh because they had 3 first-round picks tied up in the guy. So
I think considering that the Vikings just drafted a quarterback in the 5th round this year kind of shows that like they're not going to give up that same value for another quarterback this year who is no further along than the quarterback they just took. Yes, like having more competition, whatever, that's fine. But chances are you bring in Trey Lance, then you have 4 quarterbacks on the roster. Somebody's for sure getting cut. Whether it's Hall or Lance, one of them's either going to get probably scooped up by somebody else. So you're going to lose one of them anyways.
For sure.
So there's really no real reason to go do it. Now, the one thing I will say about the whole 49ers situation and, where Trey Lance maybe could land on his feet, maybe it's not Dallas, because it seems pretty clear that, Dak Prescott's going to be the quarterback there. He's got a couple years left on his deal. He got paid a lot of money. Jerry Jones really likes him. He's a pretty competent quarterback. So chances are you're not going to, boot him out of town unless Trey Lance really shows you something. So maybe it's somewhere else where Trey Lance lands on his feet. However, what I will say is that I think with the whole Niners situation, there's at least been some reporting, and there was some reporting back in the 2021 draft where it wasn't necessarily agreed upon that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan both wanted Trey Lance. It seems like I think it was Shanahan who wanted Mac Jones.
Yeah.
And so, maybe the fact that, okay, Shanahan's like, well, I got this guy, Lynch gave him to me. I got to see if he can play. Part of me thinks Shanahan did Lance no favors to set up an offensive system that fit his strengths. Shanahan is such an offensive genius that he's probably thinking like, I have an offense that anybody can run. So figure it out, rookie. Like, no one thought anything of Brock Purdy, but he looks good in the Niners offense because it's so well manicured. But that's maybe just not what Trey Lance is. And, maybe it's Dallas, maybe it's somewhere else who can put more of an emphasis on what Trey Lance does well, to elevate his strengths. And it would be awesome to see him pop because there's been so much talk about him, obviously, for the last few years. He's a local kid. There's a lot of things that you would like to see, him thrive with, but I think part of me thinks that maybe San Francisco was the worst possible place for him to get drafted because he does not fit into what Shanahan likes to do offensively. Right. And he's a wild card, and Shanahan wanted him to be a straight and narrow arrow guy. And, maybe that's just it was the wrong situation. So it'd be awesome if he went somewhere that was, not Green Bay and just played great.
I do think that
So
it's because that's a double-edged sword, right? Because Shanahan's offense is Shanahan's offense, and he wants to, I don't think he's going to change it because of his personnel. He's going to say, no, anybody that can throw an on-time and accurate pass can run this thing. And Trey Lance looked awful in it in the preseason, and the reports out of camp was, he was terrible. And so it's kind of like, it seems like to run the Shanahan offense, you need to be able to play quarterback at the lowest competent level, and he will make you shine. And the fact that Trey Lance wasn't able to say, okay, hey, I can run it at a competent level. Plus, by the way, when a play gets blown up, I'm not going to just, melt or get sacked or throw a pick like Jimmy Garoppolo did. The idea was Trey Lance could then run around for a couple of seconds, buy some time, and find, Debo or Ayuk, down the field and make some splash plays happen off script. Kind of what the criticism of Cousins is like, yeah, if he stays on script, he's like top 5, but when he has to come off of, the script, he kind of falls apart a little bit whenever it comes to that Fern Talkington run around, try to make something happen type of style. So, but Cousins can do the traditional quarterback thing of find open guy, throw tight window, accuracy, all that stuff. He can do that really well. And so, but again, Trey Lance is 23 years old. I mean, he's 2 years younger than Jaron Hall. And I was just praising Jaron Hall for throwing. So if Trey Lance can be Jaron Hall level accurate in 2 years when he's a free agent, I'm not closing the book on Trey Lance Vikings quite yet. Seems like if you put like gun to my head, I know that's violent, but gun to my head, have to predict the next few seasons. Cousins this year, the inevitable Aaron Rodgers NFC Championship on next season,
of course,
and then Trey Lance the year after that, and we kind of see what happens. But kidding, of course. Let's talk in 25. Let's talk in 2025 and see where we're at. These will be my final thoughts. Little things to chew on that we don't have time to get into this week. We have busy schedules, and there's going to be a lot of people losing their jobs that we'll talk about later this week. I have a gut feeling. We don't have time to dissect it. I have a gut feeling TJ Hawkinson does not finish this season with the Vikings. It just seems like, Kwesi just seems like the kind of guy that if you're not going to sign a long-term deal at this price and you're just going to walk in free agency, we'll get a second-round pick for you this year. We'll get, we'll see what happens. I want to know what's holding up the Justin Jefferson deal, why that's not done, why are we not giving him a boatload of money. We already talked about that. And this one's controversial. I would give up a second-round pick and some cap space to sign Jonathan Taylor. Even if we had to include Alex Madison in the deal, I would give up a second-round pick and some cap space for Jonathan Taylor strictly because I drafted him in my fantasy football league. And so nothing would make me happier than for him to be the Vikings' bell cow. Other than that, it's been a fun show, Shop Unified. Follow Will on Twitter, at Will Badloos, and the show on Twitter, at LTB Vikings. Subscribe to the YouTube, do all that fun stuff. Find us where you get your podcasts. Will, I'll let you walk us out.
There was just so much in that final thought.
I had a lot.
I'll respond very briefly to all of your 3 points.
I love it.
One, TJ Hawkinson not finishing the season with the Vikings. I think that's on the bingo card. I think that's on the table. I don't think it's going to happen, but I don't think you're crazy. The second one, Justin Jefferson. Reports from Albert Breer today that the Vikings are looking to have that long-term deal with Jefferson done before week 1. Right. So that would be ideal. But to your point, why is it taking so long? And the third and final thing, Jonathan Taylor to the Vikings for Alexander Madison. In theory, in a vacuum, in rainbows and butterflies land, I agree. He's awesome. It'd be great to have him in the backfield. However, it's not happening. The Vikings are not going to pay him big money, which he wants. And if he comes here and they're like, we're not paying you, he would just hold out again.
But did you see the reports? He is now willing to take less than market value to play for not the Colts. So there is like that's what's being said now, is he's lowering his number significantly just to basically give Jim Irsay a couple middle fingers, and Jonathan Taylor's basically saying, I'm glad that Elka died, that you loved so much, Jim Irsay. I hope everything goes wrong in your life. I'm out of here. And so I'm in on it, man. I'm just saying. I'm all in on it.
I don't want to crash your party on this one. But I just don't see it happening. The Vikings just moved on from an expensive running back.
Yeah.
They are trying to get into the business of running back by committee, cheaper backs, with already some salary cap gobbledygook for this season. They're not going to go get Jonathan Taylor and then extend him for big money. It's just not going to happen.
It's not going to.
So if it happened and he was happy here and it was great, and the Vikings won a Super Bowl with him, of course we'd love it, but it's just not going to happen.
We should point out we record these shows on Mondays. So this show is being recorded. Yeah. It is currently 8:45 Central Time on a Monday. This is going to post tomorrow at like 10. Jonathan Taylor might be a Dolphin by then. So this could all be null and void. If it is, sorry that you had to listen to us ramble about this.
All right, we'll see you guys on Thursday. We'll have some reactions to the 53-man roster and, of course, the cuts. For Will and Jordan, this was Load the Box. Skol, y'all.